There are several ways to communicate about the absolute truth. One way is to become so close to those who know it, who speak it, that one in effect emanates their words. One's relationship with a spiritual, realized teacher that develops over time through service and discipline in following the practices. If one engages continuously in hearing the teachings of that holy person from their mouth or from their books, but especially hearing their verbal instructions, as long as one's faith is strong and those teachings are pure and bringing one closer and closer to one's own realization of the Supreme, when one tries to express what is one's realization to an audience, to the public, naturally what comes out is a recitation of what one has heard. And this is how the knowledge of the sacred uh, literature of India, the Vedas, and other cultures as well, has been passed down through the ages. It is a hearing and reciting process. So two things primarily. But the heart and the heart's submission, acceptance, and appreciation for that master and for the teachings cannot be minimized. Direct connection to this God in our heart comes gradually according to our qualification. Now, the second type of person, they enhance through the teachings of the masters their knowledge of how to approach the absolute truth, and they do. And by the fragrance of their own revelations, they seek to inspire others with their words, with their teachings, with their account of the teachings of the masters in the Holy Scriptures. But it is an organic and it is a process of sharing a very personal journey that one reveals the insights, the concepts, and the revelations from one's own spiritual journey. So, and it may seem apparently externally that one type of person who's sharing transcendental knowledge is parroting or just repeating what they have heard from spiritual authorities. Another type may seem that they are independent of their spiritual authorities in the sense that they give credit, but they also leave room to explore the depths of their own understanding. And thus they do not parrot or repeat things they've heard, but rather they put the teachings into their own words to understand. Now, is one better than the other? No. It all depends on how one wishes to relate to the process of hearing from a spiritual teacher. This cannot be emphasized enough because the entire culture rests upon this one underlying fact. It, in its essence, evolves towards the ideal by participating in the activities, in the way of thinking, in the moods of the heart that the teacher is explaining, is revealing, is clarifying. And this is the most important key to understanding Vedic literature, that directly one cannot understand through one's own hard endeavor, one's own intelligence, one's own labor of love to reconcile the teachings. In other words, unless one takes the help of a person who is more advanced, one will not be able to understand the actual teachings or purports. What are the treasures that are buried deep within the Vedic literature? So there's always going to be a myriad of types of people that approach the religious process. Some will be ecclesiastical, some will be based on their sense of responsibility to country or to their family god, or whatever it might be. You could always find that there are going to be many, many different varieties of worshipers and many different varieties of worship. And this is, for time immemorial, applies, and it's not to minimize one over the other, but to strengthen the understanding of the principle of a bona fide and supreme teaching that comes through a realized bona fide person. That person, we have to understand and separate the understanding in the West with the word guru, because it's not a Western world. It doesn't just mean a teacher or expert. This person who can impart the knowledge of the absolute truth is a bona fide guru or sat guru. And these two things must be present. Number one, that it is the absolute truth. It's not a watered down version of it. It's not a second hand. It's not something that has been changed or altered from what the previous spiritual masters have spoken in the line of how it has been passed down generation to generation, hearing and speaking it. No, it is unchanged, and thus the words of that spiritual master, spiritual teacher, are completely in alignment with the words as they are revealed in the scripture. So that is the first thing, that they are representing the highest truth for the welfare of humanity. Second thing is they are representing it for the welfare of humanity and not for their own self. Only if one truly understands that the absolute truth frees one from bondage to this world, to the sufferings, to all of the inconveniences that come about inevitably due to our entanglement with the reaction of our own actions. We cannot escape it. There are laws of this world that function, and the absolute truth surpasses all of them. It completely frees one from the inebrities of this world. Thus, if one is a qualified spiritual teacher, representative of that, they will not be entangled in this material energy. They will not have their interests in this material world. Rather, they will seek the shelter of the transcendental world. That is rare, but that is the qualification. Number one, they have complete knowledge of the absolute truth which they are presented, and it is, in fact, the absolute truth. And number three, that they have realized that truth. They are not just speaking theoretically or hypothetically. The realization of that in their own heart enables them to impart it to others. That is something that is completely different from the concept of guru in our West, where it is a transaction, it is not a transmission. A spiritual master who is transmitting knowledge of the absolute truth, of the absolute God's love. That is the highest truth that there is. It is that love is God, God is love, and God's love is the highest meditation and the highest awakened state to be aware of. And what that means, how that can be attained, and the whole culture around it is what Guru imparts and represents. To who? To disciple. To one who is disciplined to go through the necessary deprogramming from this conditioned material state of existence, because in a life lived of awareness of God's love, all the rules of man are completely of a different game. It is selfless. It is not selfish. It is completely tolerant. It is not intolerant. It has all the good qualities that is apparent in any person who is of noble character, and they happen automatically by dint of the presence of a higher power within oneself. It becomes instilled by the power of the spiritual master, of the Sadguru. It does not become manifested magically by their power. This isn't some so-called gurus do mystical tricks, things that by their power they bestow something into their disciples. It is not like that. There is a relationship between the master and disciple, and yes, that is sacred, it is transcendental, it is mystical, but the disciple ultimately does the practices and realizes through their own work, through their own endeavor, through their own sacrifice of themselves. Nobody can do that. Nobody can do that for another person. Even a realized soul cannot do that. They can impart the wisdom how a conditioned soul, how a person who is stuck in the rungs of this machine-like world, going further and further away from their nature of infinite joy and love, which is just a part of God's love. When they connect to that ocean, that reservoir, which Sri Guru is imparting the process to, they become fulfilled, and automatically all of the things that have been troubling them can eventually disappear. This is something that everybody has to find time to dedicate themselves to. If there isn't that question that comes, do I have time for this? If one honestly says no, then one has to reprogram one's own way of thinking about life itself and what one's priorities to make time for the spiritual practices which are imparted to oneself by the spiritual authorities. Otherwise, hoping that one will get the result magically, or if by chance, or if it's one's astrology, is absolute ludicrous. It is just the same principle of this world. What one works for, one gets. What one invests one's time in, one receives the fruits of. What one invests one's energy, one's focus, one's attention, one gets that. How can one ever expect that one will attain to this highest platform which is being shared by these great exalted spiritual masters of wisdom that is literally timeless, that ancient sages have spent decades and entire lifetimes to realize? Is it so easily attainable? If we think that even something as simple as saying the prayers is something that we cannot make time for, the prayers that are given by the spiritual master, by the teachings, the lineage, the bona fide revelations, prayers to God's love, if we honestly feel that we don't have time to say that, are we being sincere? Are we really being sincere on the spiritual path? And once we understand the value of those prayers, once we realize that our life is so shallow and insignificant without our own heart relationship to God's love through the practices and especially through all of the prayers, if we don't dedicate to making our life prayerful, then what can we say about our desire to receive the results of this spiritual work, either in this life or in the next? We might just be fooling ourselves, but we're certainly not fooling anybody else. So the proof is when we develop a taste that it's not something we do by force, but we do because it's so relishable, it's so uniquely beautiful, it's the most exquisite part of one's daily routine, one's life. And so when we come to that, then we are in the safe zone. We are then firmly situated on the path. But until then, we must try, we must apply ourselves, we must, with focus and determination, not give up on our endeavor to make a steady effort towards doing the spiritual practices that are the basis, the foundation of our spiritual awakening. So that is one step at a time. And if one misses and doesn't do, it's not that one gives up. One just goes back to doing it the next day as soon as one can. This is the greatest obstacle is the inertia, the feeling that now there's no time, all of these other engagements are more important. We must remember that at any moment death may come. If we don't give our spiritual time to awakening our birthright, that at the time of death we will be in a shameful position, meaning our consciousness will be in a shameful position. It won't be surrounded with the remembrance of God's love. Instead, it will be in a shameful position, just feeling the sufferings of the material body slipping away. So we don't want to have regrets at the end of this life about missing the boat, the opportunity. This life, human form, is a boat to cross over the ocean. What is the ocean? This material existence is the ocean. It is not the eternal home of the soul. It is just a school for the soul to develop love of God. And that is the central theme, the central point of all of the practices that we want to engage in. With that intention, all of our activities become imbued with that goal, and the more and more that we strive to serve towards the mission through connection with our Guru, with the spiritual master who has embodied the teachings, realized them, is free from the material inebrities, and who can impart this because they have realized this knowledge. In connection, in service to our Guru, and in a relationship that develops step by step, we form bonds that are eternally connecting us to the spiritual world. This is the process that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. If you wish to understand this truth, just approach a spiritual master. Tadvidvi pranipartirna pariprashnirna sevaya bhagavate urtam shroktir bhaktir bhavarti naishtiki. That is not exactly the verse verbatim, but we must open our ears primarily to develop this firm approach to yoga union, which is called bhakti, through approaching one who has realized it. Thus, hearing every day the Srimad Bhagavad Gita is a primary foundational way to attain the direct revelation of this absolute truth, this source of unending bliss, this union with God that transcends the body, this ultimate protection from the inebrities of this world, from the calamities of this world, and ultimately from the ocean of birth and death and suffering in the repeated cycle. We take hold of hearing this holy scripture, Bhagavad Gita, as it has been explained by the Holy Master, who has explained it on behalf of God himself, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in that line, in that lineage. That understanding of Gita, the purports, that resonates with the truth of the eternal world, and that is how we enter into developing our spiritual practices with this foundation. Every day we grow more and more like a flower opening for the fragrant bee to come and land and to take all the honey. Hare Krishna.